Welcome to Simplify for Me, Maths and Economics, including CUET. Here is a thought to begin with. Economics begins where unlimited wants meet limited resources, and a choice has to be made. So, let us begin with Micro 01, Introduction to Microeconomics and Central Problems of an Economy. This lesson gives us the starting framework for understanding microeconomics. At the heart of economics lies a simple problem. Resources are limited, but human wants are many. Because everything cannot be produced or consumed in unlimited quantities, individuals as well as societies must make choices. For CUET, our NTECO focus is very clear. We need to understand what microeconomics is and the central problems faced by an economy. We will also use some supporting insert ideas, particularly scarcity, choice, the production possibility frontier and opportunity cost, because they help us understand why these central problems arise. Think of this lesson as the conceptual foundation for the entire microeconomics section. There are 4 major ideas that we will cover in this lesson. First, we will understand microeconomics, the branch of economics that studies individual consumers, households, firms, specific commodities and individual markets. Second, we will examine scarcity and choice. We will see why unlimited wants and limited resources make economic decision-making unavoidable. Third, we will study the 3 central problems of an economy: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. And finally, as supporting insert concepts, we will understand the production possibility frontier, or PPF, and opportunity cost. These concepts visually demonstrate trade-offs and sacrifice. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to connect all 4 ideas into one logical chain. Microeconomics studies the behavior and decisions of individual economic units. For example, consider a consumer. Microeconomics asks, what should this consumer buy, and how much? For a household, it studies questions such as how limited family income should be allocated among different needs. For a firm, it examines decisions such as how much output should be produced, what input should be used and at what cost. And in a particular market, microeconomics studies questions such as how the price of a commodity is determined. A useful CUET memory rule is this: consumer, firm, commodity or a specific market usually means microeconomics. If we start talking about economy-wide totals and averages, we normally move into macroeconomics. This distinction between microeconomics and macroeconomics is simple, but it is also a common CUET testing area. Microeconomics deals with individual units and specific markets. So, the price of wheat, the demand of one household, the output of one firm, or the supply in one particular market are microeconomic issues. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, studies economy-wide aggregates. Examples include the general price level or inflation, national income or GDP, total employment, and a balance of payments. Here is an important CUET trap. The price of one good is a microeconomic variable, but the general price level is a macroeconomic variable. So remember the distinction. Micro looks at the parts, macro looks at the economy as a whole. Now we come to the basic economic problem: scarcity. Human wants are virtually unlimited. We want food, housing, education, healthcare, travel, security, comfort and many other goods and services. But the resources available to satisfy these wants, such as land, labor, capital and time, are limited. Scarcity does not necessarily mean that a resource is completely absent. It means that the available quantity is insufficient relative to all the wants it could satisfy. And because these scarce resources normally have alternative uses, society must make choices. If resources are used for one purpose, they may no longer be available for another. This gives us the central logic of the lesson. Scarcity, alternative uses of resources, choice about allocation, central economic problems. And those choices lead directly to the next question. What exactly should an economy produce, how should it produce, and for whom should it produce? Because resources are scarce, every economy, whether rich or poor, must answer 3 basic questions. The first is what to produce. This means deciding which goods and services should be produced and in what quantities. The second is how to produce. This concerns the method or technique of production, whether production should rely more on labor or more on capital and machinery. The third is for whom to produce. This is the distribution question. Who ultimately receives the goods and services that are produced? A simple way to remember these is what, how, for whom. These three together form the central economic problems of every economy. The first central problem is what to produce. Since resources are limited, an economy cannot produce every good and service in unlimited quantities. It must decide both which goods and services should be produced and how much of each should be produced. For example, should more resources go towards consumer goods or capital goods? Should a government allocate more resources to hospitals, highways, defense or education? This problem arises because producing more of one good usually means producing less of another. So, for CUET, remember, what to produce means allocation of scarce resources among different goods and services, along with deciding their quantities. If a fixed public budget can finance either more hospitals or more highways, choosing between them is a classic what to produce decision. The second central problem is how to produce. Here, the economy has already decided what it wants to produce. The question now is, which production technique should be used? A labor-intensive technique uses relatively more labor and fewer machines. It may be suitable where labor is abundant and relatively inexpensive. A capital-intensive technique uses relatively more machinery, technology and capital, with less labor per unit of output. It may be suitable where capital and technology are readily available. The important point is that this problem is about the choice of production technique. So the CUET rule is simple. How to produce is equal to labor-intensive versus capital-intensive technique, or more generally, the choice of input combination. The third central problem is for whom to produce. Production creates goods and services, but society must still decide how that output will be distributed among people. This depends largely on income and purchasing power. People earn income through labor, property, enterprise and ownership of other productive resources. Their purchasing power then affects how much of the final output they are able to obtain. So this problem is not about what is produced or how it is produced. It is about distribution. A useful memory rule is, for whom to produce is equal to distribution of income, purchasing power and final output among individuals and households. This is why two economies producing the same total quantity of goods may still differ greatly in how those goods are distributed. The Production Possibility Frontier, or PPF, is an NCERT supporting concept that helps us understand scarcity, choice and trade-offs visually. A PPF shows the maximum possible combinations of two goods that an economy can produce with given resources and existing technology when resources are fully and efficiently used. Look at points A to E on the frontier. These are efficient production combinations because all available resources are being fully utilized. Point U lies inside the frontier. It is feasible, but it indicates underutilization or inefficient use of resources. Point X lies outside the frontier. With the current resources and technology, it is not attainable. The PPF therefore gives us a visual summary of three ideas: scarcity, efficiency and choice. If the economy wants more of one good while remaining on the frontier, it normally has to sacrifice some quantity of the other. That sacrifice leads directly to opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative that is sacrificed when a choice is made. The table on this slide helps us see this clearly. Suppose the economy moves from point A to B, corn production rises from 0 to 1 unit, while cotton falls from 10 units to 9. So the opportunity cost of gaining that first additional unit of corn is 1 unit of cotton. Now move from B to C, corn rises by another 1 unit, but cotton falls from 9 to 7. This time, the economy gives up 2 units of cotton. As we continue from C to D and then D to E, the cotton sacrificed for each extra unit of corn keeps increasing. This gives the pattern: 1, 2, 3 and then 4 units of cotton sacrificed. That is why a typical PPF is bowed outward. The opportunity cost of producing more of one good often rises as resources are shifted away from uses for which they are better suited. For CUET, the calculation rule is straightforward. Opportunity cost of an additional unit of one good is equal to quantity of the other good sacrificed. So whenever you see a production schedule, Compare to consecutive combinations and identify exactly what has been given up. We have seen that every economy must answer 3 questions: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. But different economic systems use different mechanisms to answer them. In a market economy, these decisions are largely guided by prices and the choices of consumers and producers. Demand, supply, and market prices influence what gets produced, how resources are used, and who is able to purchase the final output. In a centrally planned economy, a central authority or government makes the major production and allocation decisions. It determines priorities and decides how resources should be distributed among competing users. A mixed economy combines both approaches. Markets operate in many areas, while the government also intervenes when necessary. For example, in public services, regulation, and social welfare. For CUET, however, keep the priority clear. First, understand the 3 central problems themselves. The discussion of economic systems simply helps us see how different economies attempt to solve those problems. Before we revise the lesson, let us clear up some very common CUET traps. Trap number 1. Scarcity does not mean complete absence. A resource can exist and still be scarce if it is insufficient relative to all the wants it could satisfy. Trap number 2. Microeconomics does not mean a small amount of money. It refers to the study of individual economic units and specific markets. Trap number 3. Do not confuse how to produce with what to produce. What is about choosing goods and services. How is about choosing the production technique. Trap number 4. For whom to produce does not mean who produces. It is about the distribution of final output or real income among people. Trap number 5. A point inside the PPF is not impossible. It is feasible, but it represents underutilization or inefficient use of resources. And finally, opportunity cost is not simply the money spent. It is the value of the next best alternative forgone. If these 6 distinctions are clear, you have already eliminated several common conceptual mistakes. Let us now revise the entire lesson in 60 seconds. Microeconomics studies individual consumers, firms, and specific markets. The basic economic problem begins with scarcity. Wants are unlimited, but resources are limited and have alternative uses. Scarcity forces choice, and those choices create the 3 central problems. What to produce means deciding which goods and services should be produced and in what quantities. How to produce means choosing the appropriate production technique. For whom to produce concerns the distribution of output or real income among people. The production possibility frontier shows the maximum combinations that can be produced with available resources and technology. Points on the frontier are efficient, points inside indicate underutilization, and points outside are currently unattainable. An opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative that must be sacrificed when a choice is made. So keep this memory chain in mind. Scarcity, choice, allocation, central problems. That is the core of Micro 01. And with that, we complete Micro 01, Introduction to Microeconomics and Central Problems of an Economy. Thank you for learning with Simplify for Me, Maths and Economics, including CUET. Before moving ahead, I strongly recommend that you attempt the Micro 01 topic mock. It will help you check whether these concepts are actually clear when presented as CUET-style questions. Our next lesson is Micro 02, Cardinal Utility. Utility, total utility, marginal utility, and the law of diminishing marginal utility. That is where we begin the detailed study of consumer behavior. Thank you for watching, keep learning, and I will see you in Micro 02.